Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not let them be afraid. For the word of God in us and with us and through us, thanks be to God. As we enter into this scripture from the Gospel of John, Jesus is speaking at a moment that is like not an easy one. It is not just a kind of an easy, relaxing picnic on the beach sort of moment. It is people are in a space of worry and anxiety and feeling untethered. And in the midst of that, Jesus says, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. You know what he doesn't say is, don't worry, God has a plan, everything's going to be fine. Peace is something entirely hard for us to embrace, to be a part of, to offer. It is this generative peace that doesn't make everything better, that doesn't make everything easy, that doesn't provide a perfectly natural course in our minds. But this presence of willingness to be alongside, to be in the midst, to stand there with you. And I just think it would be amazing if church folks were really good at offering that kind of peace, that kind of presence. But I have been around some church folks going on about 15 years next summer. And I have heard moments that are not sort of similar to this, my peace I give to you. I do not give as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not let them be afraid. This generative peace that even in the midst of fear and anxiety is present. We tend to say things like, God has a plan. Everything happens for a reason. God doesn't give you more than you can handle. Which I just want to say, like, I'm so glad that God trusts me so much with so much heaviness. Jesus never offers plans, but it is something that's easy for us to do. I have been at a funeral for an 18-month-old. And I have witnessed the heartbreaking grief of my friends who were their parents. And I have listened as church ladies said, well, you're so young, don't worry, you can have another baby. Like that's going to make it better. I also heard them say, well, God just needed another angel. And I just think that's a really crappy way to create angels. We don't just say that at funerals. We say that a lot. This language of God needed another angel, or this is better now. I have watched people in the midst of caring for someone who is grieving try to take over, try to control things for them, try to manage things for them, say, I'm your grandma now, or I'm your dad now, or I'm your mom now. And I'm just going to let you know, like, you can't announce that you're someone's parent or surrogate anything. All you can do is simply shut up and show up. I think there's this spiritual practice of shutting up that we are not good at. I've heard from folks who have a hard diagnosis like cancer that someone they love said to them, wow, you look different. Or, well, at least you're losing weight. I think any sentence that starts with, well, at least, you should just stop yourself. Like, anything that comes after, well, at least, can be of no value. I've heard folks say, well, it's probably because you smoked, right? You must have smoked. You must have smoked a lot. And no, they didn't. I'm sure you'll be fine. Don't worry, they're working on a cure. Or, I read on the internet that this cures cancer. I've even seen family members bring their own anxiety into the hospice room. Like into a space where someone they love is dying, and all they can do is talk about how difficult the airplane travel was and how they got rerouted and how it was so challenging. To the parents or the partners who are grieving the most. We just can't shut up. When we think about grief, when we think about these spaces of loss, it's hard for us to just be a person who brings peace. Maybe it's because the world is so noisy and so busy, and we only think something matters if it's happening or if there's words we're saying. Maybe it's because we're so uncomfortable with our own mortality and our own grief and our own sadness. We say these in all kinds of situations, whether it is divorce or loss or grief or disease or sickness. When I come to this, I come with my own experience. And maybe you do too. When I was 26, I was getting a divorce from my high school sweetheart. When you decide this person and you're 16, maybe it doesn't always work out. And it wasn't my choice, and I didn't want it to happen, and I was sure that I would die a tiny shell of myself with very swollen eyes from crying all the time and living in my mom's basement and her making me lunch because I was the substitute teacher now at the high school that I attended. And there was this one moment where I was at a wedding for a high school friend, and everybody was sort of going out through the receiving line, and the organ was playing, and people were like, well, where's Jason? Where's Jason? And I was like, he's not here. He's not here. And then finally, they kept asking it, and I was like, we're getting a divorce. Just as the music stopped. And it echoed through the whole church. Then the receiving line became things like, well, at least you're so young. Or at least you didn't have kids. Or at least you didn't own a home. Because more paperwork would have really been the worst part of my whole experience. Some people would say something like, God has a plan for you, and it's going to be great when you find it. You're going to learn something because you went through that. This is why God did this to you. I was like, I have been studying all my life. Like, I would have read the book. And my favorite was, well, God just wanted you to go to seminary so he could use you for ministry. And I thought of about 100 other ways she could have accomplished that. We have this need for making things reasonable. And I don't think anybody said this to me, and I don't think any moments where we say things like God has a plan or everything's going to be fine or just smile and be positive is because we're trying to be mean. It's because we're anxious and uncomfortable and we don't know how to respond. We have to get really comfortable with what is hard, what we usually avoid, what we don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. We have to be present with our vulnerability and our own uncertainty and the realities that grief and heartbreak and sadness, they surround us. Lives can change at any moment in any number of ways. There's an article in the New York Times called What Not to Say to a Cancer Patient, which I recommend. It's very clear. But Dr. Goldberg is a therapist and a survivor. And what they say is they suggest you visit a cancer patient and that people talk less and listen more. Often the greatest support comes from silently witnessing what a person with cancer is experiencing. Sometimes only a calm presence and a compassionate listening are necessary. Silence becomes the breathing space in which people living with cancer can begin difficult conversations. Sometimes only a calm presence and compassionate listening are necessary. Silence becomes the breathing space. It is sacred work to show up and to be still and quiet and open. It is a spiritual practice to just shut up. And I don't think that's something we learn, at least not overtly. We don't have classes about how to show up and listen to our friends very often. We don't have ways that we learn to be quiet and to sit alongside a friend who is angry or sad or heartbroken or hurt. And so I want to invite us to have just some starter phrases that maybe we can repeat and practice so that when we're tempted to say, don't worry, or everything's going to be fine, or God has a plan, we have something else. We have something else that can remind us. What if we could work on saying, I don't know exactly what to say? That is honest. But please know how much I care. I don't know exactly what to say, but please know how much I care. I'm so sorry that this is happening to you. And this might upset, like, say, my grandma. But I think often the most appropriate response is, that sucks. Or this sucks. Like, there's just not strong enough language for how hard this is. And just saying that and acknowledging it and then being there. Can I bring you dinner? Can I run an errand? Can I go with you to your appointment? These spaces of just being present, they're hard for us in a world that values action and activity and words and things happening. They're hard for us because we want our friends and our family and the people that we love, the people that we see bearing grief, to feel better. It is hard for us because we want to feel better when we are in those spaces. And it is hard because we don't often spend enough time centering and getting comfortable with who we are. This is not easy work. And I will say, this language of God has a plan. As someone who's been the recipient and someone who has come through, it would be easy for me to theologically or just carelessly say, yes, that must have been God's plan. Like, life got much better. Thanks be to God, he wanted a divorce. Things really improved. I couldn't say that when I was 26. I can say that when I'm 45. But I don't think it was about a plan at all as much as it was about presence. This presence of people who would sit with me and listen to me and be there while I was crying. This presence of people who showed up and invited me to take walks and to be there and to encourage me to get out and to try new things again. That kind of presence is something that gives life over and over and over. We go through all of these spaces where we need it, where we long for it, and where we offer it again and again and again. It is not about this theology of plan. It is about this theology of presence. That this loving, life-giving, generative presence helps us in the midst of our fear, uncertainty, and anxiety because we are not alone. May we have the courage to listen, to be still, to be centered, and to offer our whole hearts to the people we journey alongside. May it be so. Amen.